What happens when reason meets revelation? When faith and philosophy no longer stand apart, but walk the same road? There was a time when the world's greatest thinkers spoke in Arabic and Persian, when the search for truth crossed borders, languages, and empires. In that age, philosophy became not just a discipline, but a bridge, linking Athens to Baghdad and Persia to the heart of medieval Europe. This is the story of how ancient wisdom was reborn under new skies, how the flame of thought passed from Greece to Islam and from Islam to the world. It began with a movement of minds. In the 9th century, under the Abbasid caliphs, Baghdad became the capital of knowledge. Inside the House of Wisdom, scholars gathered scrolls and ideas from across the ancient world. They translated Aristotle and Plato, the works of Alexandria and beyond, into Arabic. But translation was only the beginning. These thinkers didn't just preserve, they transformed. They asked, how can reason serve revelation? How can faith embrace philosophy without losing its soul? Thus was born Falsafa, Islamic philosophy, where logic met theology, and inquiry itself became a form of devotion. Here, to understand creation was to draw nearer to its creator. Among the first to walk this path was Al-Kindi, the man later called the philosopher of the Arabs. In an age when the world was still learning how to hold faith and reason in the same breath, he dared to claim that truth was one wherever it was found, whether in Greek wisdom, Persian science, or divine revelation. To him, knowledge was a single radiant light refracted through many lamps. The Greek thinkers were not infidels of reason, but fellow seekers of the same truth that revelation illuminated. Al-Kindi was born in Kufa, the son of an emir, a man of noble descent, yet of restless intellect. His life unfolded at the heart of the Abbasid Golden Age, where translators labored in the House of Wisdom to give Arabic voice to the lost works of Plato and Aristotle. Appointed to oversee this vast endeavor, Al-Kindi had access to the intellectual treasures of the world, and he saw no heresy in studying them. To understand God's creation, he argued, was to honor it. Rational inquiry, far from threatening faith, was itself a form of devotion, a prayer of the mind toward the perfection of the divine order. He wrote hundreds of treatises spanning mathematics, optics, astronomy, music, and metaphysics, a map of the universe drawn by thought alone. He introduced the Indian numerals that now shape every scientific equation. And yet his deepest work was philosophical, the attempt to harmonize revelation with reason. In his vision, philosophy and theology were not adversaries, but allies, each completing what the other began. For the seeker of truth, he wrote, nothing takes precedence over truth itself. No matter who speaks it, truth ennobles both the speaker and the listener. At the core of Al-Kindi's thought was the conviction that unity is perfection, and that the unity of God, the one without parts or change, is mirrored in the unity of all truth. From this perfection flows all existence, as light flows from the sun, an emanation not of separation, but of divine abundance. The universe to him was the overflowing of the one, a continuous act of being, radiating from the plenitude of God's reality. In this belief, Al-Kindi found courage against dogmatism. When others sought to bind the infinite to literal words, to picture God as sitting, moving, or changing, he reminded them that what is perfect cannot be altered, for change belongs only to what is incomplete. God's eternity, therefore, is not a moment extended forever, but the stillness from which all moments emerge. Through Al-Kindi, a new synthesis was born, a way of thinking where faith did not silence inquiry, and reason did not exile God. His philosophy opened the gates of knowledge, inviting future generations, Al-Farabi, Avicenna, Averroes, to walk further into the light. In him, the Islamic world discovered that to think deeply was not to doubt the divine, but to glimpse its design more clearly. And thus, through the mind of Al-Kindi, the world learned a timeless truth. That wisdom, wherever it is found, is but a fragment of the same divine whole. After Al-Kindi came Al-Farabi, the master synthesizer, the philosopher who sought to turn the scattered lights of Greek, Islamic, and mystical thought into a single radiant vision of truth. He imagined the universe not as a chaos of forces, but as a grand hierarchy, an ordered cosmos flowing from the one. the divine intelligence at its summit, cascading downward through the spheres of existence until it reached the world of human beings. To know that order, Al-Farabi believed, was to know ourselves. For every human mind is a microcosm of the cosmic mind. Understanding the structure of the universe was not mere speculation. It was the key to human perfection and ultimate happiness. In his Virtuous City, he envisioned an ideal state ruled not by the sword or by wealth, but by wisdom. The true ruler, he wrote, must be both philosopher and prophet, one whose intellect mirrors the harmony of the cosmos and whose soul reflects the divine order. Such a leader does not rule through fear, but through insight, guiding citizens as reason guides the soul. His city was not merely political, it was metaphysical, a reflection of the very structure of reality itself. For Al-Farabi, philosophy was the highest form of worship. Where theology begins from revelation, philosophy begins from wonder. Where faith accepts, philosophy understands. Yet he saw no conflict between them, only different paths leading toward the same light. Logic, he argued, was the universal grammar of thought, the language by which all truths, regardless of tongue or scripture, could be expressed. It was the bridge between reason and revelation, allowing the human intellect to glimpse the divine order beneath the surface of words. His view of the soul was equally profound. Like Aristotle, he described its faculties: rational, imaginative, sensory, and nutritive, each a layer of consciousness linking humanity to the wider cosmos. But Al-Farabi gave imagination a sacred role. It was the bridge between intellect and prophecy. Through imagination, divine truths could descend into the human world as symbols, dreams, and revelations, veiled truths that poets and prophets translate for those not trained in philosophy. In this sense, poetry, prophecy, and philosophy were not separate pursuits, but different echoes of the same eternal harmony. He believed that when societies fall from the ideal, it is because they forget this harmony. Some are ignorant, unaware of the higher truths of existence. Others are wicked, knowing the good, but refusing to live by it. And still others are errant, misguided by false interpretations of truth. For Al-Farabi, civilization itself depends on the state of the collective soul. When reason falters, societies decay. When wisdom leads, they flourish. Through him, philosophy ceased to be the private contemplation of a few and became the very foundation of civilization. He wove together Aristotle's reason, Plato's ideals, and the Islamic vision of divine unity into one continuous fabric, where science, ethics, and politics were no longer separate threads, but expressions of a single cosmic order. In Al-Farabi's thought, to seek truth was not simply to think clearly, it was to live rightly, to build cities that reflect the geometry of the heavens, and to shape souls that mirror the divine. Through him, philosophy became more than a pursuit of knowledge. It became a map for the soul and a guide for the destiny of humankind. Then came Avicenna, or Ibn Sina, the towering intellect of Islamic philosophy, whose thought rose like a minaret from the vast plains of reason and revelation. Before him, minds like Al-Kindi and Al-Farabi had already opened the gates to Greek wisdom, proving that faith and philosophy need not be enemies. But it was Avicenna who built from their foundations a grand cathedral of metaphysics, an architecture of being itself. He took Aristotle's fragments and, with the precision of a physician and the vision of a poet, wove them into a complete system of existence. He asked, why does anything exist at all? From this question, he distinguished between essence and existence, between what a thing is and that it is. Every created being, he said, possesses essence without necessity. It could exist or not exist. Only in God do essence and existence merge into one. Only in the divine is being inseparable from what is. Avicenna called God the Necessary Existent, the one whose existence is not borrowed, but self-sustaining, from whom all things flow as light from the sun. The universe, then, is not a creation ex nihilo in the crude sense, but an emanation from the fullness of God's being, an overflowing of perfection cascading into multiplicity. Every layer of existence, from the highest intellect to the lowest particle of matter, bears within it a trace of that original necessity. In this vision, existence itself becomes a living hierarchy of light and intellect. The human soul, standing midway between matter and spirit, mirrors this structure, nourished like plants. sensing like animals and reasoning like angels. The rational soul, Avicenna taught, carries within it a spark of the divine intellect, a longing for truth that is nothing less than the echo of God's own self-contemplation. To know truth is, in some measure, to return to the source of all knowing. And yet Avicenna was not a recluse of the mind. He was a physician, a scientist, a statesman, and a poet. His canon of medicine guided the healing arts of East and West for centuries, studied in the halls of Paris and Padua long after his death. His book of healing was not about curing the body but the soul, an exploration of how reason itself can lead to spiritual wholeness. Avicenna believed that philosophy had two aims: to find the true and to find the good. The first perfects the mind through knowledge. The second perfects the soul through virtue. Thus, logic became for him not a mere instrument of argument, but a ladder to happiness. The disciplined art through which the soul ascends from confusion to clarity, from the contingent to the eternal. In Avicenna, intellect reached its zenith. Philosophy became an act of devotion, a bridge between Aristotle's logic and the Quran's revelation. His universe was not cold machinery, but sacred geometry. Every motion of the stars, every pulse of the heart, part of a divine architecture of meaning. And when he was urged, late in life, to rest from his labors, he replied, "I prefer a short life with width to a narrow life with length." He died on the road, still in pursuit of knowledge, and in thought became a pilgrimage, the restless journey of the human mind toward the necessary existent, toward the perfection that gives all things their being. Avicenna's legacy would ripple across centuries into Aquinas' cathedrals of theology, into the Jewish mysticism of Maimonides, into the rational debates of Europe's awakening. Beneath all these echoes remains the same pulse, that behind every contingent thing lies a necessity. Behind every question, a source. In Avicenna, philosophy was not only reason illuminated by faith, it was reason becoming faith itself, the intellect kneeling before the mystery of being. But every peak casts a shadow. With Al-Ghazali, philosophy met its greatest critic, not from without, but from within. He was no mere destroyer of reason, he was its surgeon. Al-Ghazali admired intellect, yet saw its boundaries shimmering before the infinite. Could logic alone pierce the veil of the divine? Could the human mind, bound by causality and habit, touch what lies beyond time? He looked at the philosophers of his age, Avicenna above all, and saw a dangerous confidence, a faith in reason that had begun to rival faith itself. In the incoherence of the philosophers, he turned the weapons of reason upon reason, showing that their own demonstrations failed by their own standards. What they called necessity, he saw as mere habit. What they called law, he called the constant will of God. To Al-Ghazali, the link between cause and effect was not an unbreakable chain of logic, but a habit of the human mind, an expectation formed by repetition. Fire does not burn by its own power, he said. It burns because God wills it, anew, in every instant. This was more than theology, it was a radical reimagining of reality. For if nothing exists by necessity but God, then all creation depends upon divine presence in every breath, every flicker of existence. The universe is not a machine running on its own principles. It is a miracle unfolding, moment by moment. Yet Al-Ghazali's critique was not born of contempt for thought, but of devotion to truth. He had studied philosophy deeply, mastered its language, and only then declared its limits. What reason could not grasp, the purified heart could glimpse. Through discipline, introspection, and the mystic path of Sufism, he sought not argument, but transformation. For him, knowledge was not light stored in the mind, it was fire ignited in the soul. His writings rekindled spirituality across the Islamic world. The jurist became a mystic, the logician, a lover of God. In the revival of the religious sciences, he taught that salvation lies not in syllogisms, but in sincerity, not in debate, but in the purification of one's being. The intellect, once exalted, was humbled, and in that humility, renewed. In Al-Ghazali, philosophy was not silenced, but transfigured. He forced it to kneel, not in defeat, but in reverence, before the mystery it sought to measure. Philosophy, once proud of its reason, found in him a mirror. To know truth, one must also know the limits of knowing. And so, from the ruins of certainty, Al-Ghazali built a new vision of wisdom, one where intellect bows to illumination, and the human heart becomes the true site of revelation. Then, in distant Andalusia, Averroes, Ibn Rushd, rose to defend philosophy once more. He stood at the crossroads of faith and reason, in an age where the two seemed destined to part ways. To him, truth was not a battleground, but a bridge. An invisible thread linking revelation and reflection, scripture and science, soul and syllogism. He believed that reason was not the enemy of faith, but its highest expression. Faith, he said, gives us the light to see. Reason teaches us how to walk toward it. Where others saw danger in the questioning mind, Averroes saw devotion, an act of worship through understanding. For to contemplate creation was, in his eyes, to draw nearer to the Creator himself. He devoted his life to interpreting Aristotle, earning the title, the Commentator. But in truth, he was more than a translator of logic. He was a translator of civilizations. His pen became a bridge between the Greek and the Arabic, between the philosophical and the theological. Through him, the echoes of Athens found new life in the mosques and libraries of Cordoba, then journeyed northward to Paris and Padua. To Averroes, philosophy and religion were not rival paths, but two modes of ascent toward the same summit of truth, one climbing by the intellect, the other by faith. There are, he taught, three ways to reach understanding: the path of reason for the philosopher, of dialectic for the theologian, and of persuasion for the multitude. Each path was legitimate. Each suited the soul it served. In this, Averroes stood against the rising tide of theological fear, against those who, like Al-Ghazali, saw reason as a threat to revelation. He replied not with condemnation, but with coherence. With the incoherence of the incoherence, a defense of philosophy as divine obedience itself. The Quran, he argued, commands believers to reflect, to observe, to think. To philosophize, then, was not rebellion. It was faith made luminous by reason. For Averroes, the apparent conflicts between revelation and reason were not real contradictions, but misunderstandings of language and symbol. The sacred text, he said, speaks in layered meanings, some open to all, others hidden for those who can read with the eyes of intellect. Philosophy unveils those deeper meanings, lifting metaphor into metaphysics. He envisioned a universe where faith and thought were partners in a single dance, God, the eternal source, the universe, his reflection, and reason, the mirror that helps the human soul recognize the divine image within itself. His work reawakened Aristotle in the West, but also something greater, the conviction that no truth can contradict another truth, that to seek understanding is to serve both God and man. Through Averroes, the dialogue between philosophy and theology crossed into Europe. In the lecture halls of Paris, his commentaries ignited centuries of debate on faith and reason, the soul, and the cosmos. His ideas would inspire Thomas Aquinas, who, though he disagreed with him, could not ignore his light. And thus, from the heart of Islamic Spain, a man who saw reason as worship and knowledge as reverence helped shape the very foundations of Western thought. In his synthesis of logic and faith, Averroes offered not merely a defense of philosophy, but a vision of harmony, that truth, like light, is one, even when it shines through many lamps. Meanwhile, in Persia, philosophy took a more inward turn. It sought not only to know truth, but to experience it. Here, reason met mysticism, and the intellect, once an instrument of logic, became a light in itself. It began with Al-Kindi, who dared to say that nothing is nobler than truth itself, that no faith is weakened, but rather exalted by the pursuit of understanding. To him, philosophy was not foreign to revelation. It was its radiant reflection. He brought the numbers of India, the science of Greece, and the spirit of Islam into a single horizon of thought. For the seeker after truth, he wrote, nothing takes precedence over truth. From this devotion to reason, the flame passed to Al-Farabi, the second teacher. He envisioned philosophy as the purest path to reality, higher even than theology. He believed logic to be the universal language of thought, structure beneath all human speech, uniting minds across faiths and tongues. In his metaphysics, the world flowed forth from the divine intellect in a great chain of emanation, or being descended through celestial minds until it reached the world of matter. Yet even here, imagination, the power of prophecy and poetry, bridged heaven and earth, translating divine truth into the symbols humans could feel. Then came Avicenna, the physician of both body and soul. His vast mind saw the universe as a necessary unfolding of the One. All existence, he taught, is sustained by a single, necessary being, whose overflowing reality gives rise to everything else. For Avicenna, to think truly was to draw nearer to the divine, for the intellect itself was a spark of the eternal light. Existence was the true subject of philosophy, more fundamental than essence, more real than any form, a living current of being in which everything participates. Yet not all welcomed this union of reason and revelation. Al-Ghazali, the mystic of Khorasan, challenged the philosophers for straying too far from faith. Logic, he said, could not touch the heart of divine reality. True knowledge comes not from argument, but from the burning of the soul in direct experience of God. Philosophy, for all its brilliance, could not cross the threshold of the infinite. Only illumination could. And so, in the centuries that followed, the Persian mind turned inward, toward the light behind reason itself. Suhrawardi, the master of illumination, reimagined existence as a vast hierarchy of light descending from the eternal source. Reality was no longer a structure of concepts, but a radiance, degrees of luminosity emanating from the divine. Knowledge, he said, is not gained through syllogism, but through direct illumination, a light that awakens within the soul. His was a philosophy of dawn, where the intellect is not a mirror, but a flame. Centuries later, Mulla Sadra would bring this illumination to its most transcendent form. Building upon Avicenna, Al-Farabi, and Suhrawardi, he proclaimed that existence itself, not essence, is the ultimate reality. Being is alive, dynamic, in perpetual motion. Everything from dust to spirit is moving inward, toward its own perfection, toward God. This was his doctrine of substantial motion, where the universe is not a fixed creation, but an endless becoming. In Mulla Sadra's Transcendent Theosophy, philosophy, theology, and mysticism finally converged. Truth was no longer confined to thought or revelation. It was the very movement of being itself, the soul's journey through the ever-deepening light of existence. Thus, in Persia, philosophy became a path of illumination, a bridge between the intellect and the divine, a mirror where the rational and the mystical, the Greek and the Islamic, the human and the eternal, became one radiant whole. From Baghdad to Cordoba, from Isfahan to Toledo, these thinkers built the intellectual bridge between the ancient and the modern world. They preserved Aristotle and Plato, but also transformed them, infusing reason with faith and science with soul. When their works were translated into Latin, Europe rediscovered its forgotten heritage through the language of Islam. Their influence ignited the universities of Paris and Bologna, gave rise to scholasticism, and later, to humanism. They showed that the pursuit of truth need not divide faith and reason, but could unite them into a single, luminous path. The legacy of Arabic and Persian philosophy endures not only in libraries and manuscripts, but in the very idea that knowledge and belief can coexist, that light can pass from one civilization to another without ever dimming. The story of Arabic and Persian philosophy is a story of bridges between East and West, mind and spirit, reason and revelation. It reminds us that truth has never belonged to one people or one age. It travels, translated, debated, rediscovered, like light itself. If this journey sparked something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Can philosophy still bridge the worlds we live in today?